In past episodes, we've considered types of experiences that can have a profound effect on a person's world view. Tonight, we'll consider some of the biggest potential paradigm shifts of them all. One may occur sooner rather than later. Welcome to the Peep Podcast. I'm your host, Nicolle Maroc, and on this episode, we're doing something a little different and talking about some big news that broke this week. But first, I want to say hello and welcome to my new listeners. Whether you found me by accident or we met at Monster Fest in Canton, Ohio this past weekend, I'm happy you're here. I met some really awesome people over the weekend and had a lot of fun. Seth Breedlove and the Small Town Monsters crew put together a fantastic conference. If you follow me on social media, you probably saw that I had a great time. Finally met some of my podcasting heroes, astonishing legends Scott and Forrest, plus Rich Haddam, Micah Hanks, Shannon LeGros, Lyle Blackburn, and Jim Harold. And I spent a lot of money at the vendors' tables on books and other cool merchandise. There was so much talent and so many great people, all in one place. Oh, and the movie premiere Friday night? Amazing. On the Trail of Bigfoot, Land of the Missing takes you to the darker side of the Bigfoot phenomena in Alaska. And it's well done, as always. Seth and his crew are my favorite documentary team because they tackle cryptid subjects from the perspective of how the encounters affect the people who've had them. Always well-researched and beautifully filmed. If you haven't checked out their productions on Amazon Prime Video and YouTube, you really should. If you happen to be following my pages on Twitter or Facebook Monday morning, you might have seen that I shared a news article from the Debrief, a news outlet co-founded by Micah Hanks, whom I had the pleasure of meeting this weekend in Canton. During our personal conversation and during his talk at the conference, he mentioned some really big news was going to drop on Monday, and he was not exaggerating. If the insinuations are true, it could be paradigm shifting for many people. I'll put the link to the article in the show notes, and by the time you hear this episode, their servers should be able to handle the traffic. They struggled a bit Monday morning when the story spread like wildfire through social media. If you haven't read it yet, here's the gist of it. A well-credentialed whistleblower has filed a classified complaint stating in effect that the government is in possession of, and I quote, materials from objects of non-human origin. And others have come forward to back up his claims. Before we get into more detail, I want to take a step back and think about how different types of people might handle this kind of news story, and consider some other hypotheticals that could happen in the future. Back in episode 26, when I discussed near-death experiences with Robert and Susan Mays, we talked about typical and atypical NDEs and how people who had them considered them life-altering for the better. For example, people who were agnostic about the afterlife and those who were convinced that there was nothing but a dirt nap after death had a complete change in their worldview after experiencing a near-death experience. And doctors became believers when they had patients describe things in the operating room they should not have been able to sense because they were flatlined on an operating table. When confronted in that very personal way with the reality of our consciousness surviving bodily death, non-believers have two choices: become a believer or convince themselves that the event wasn't real. Why would someone talk themselves out of believing their own experience? Because it feels safer to stay in their comfort zone. I've seen the same thing happen with people who experience haunting activity. Die-hard skeptics can have a supernatural experience corroborated by other witnesses, and still deny the event was paranormal. Whether they had a moment of acceptance the instant it happened and eventually talked themselves out of it, or just dismissed it out of hand for no other reason than it couldn't possibly have happened, in outright denial of their own senses, they just couldn't integrate that experience into the way they thought the world must work. Here are a few hypothetical examples of ways your paradigm could shift as things that we thought were just myths and legends are proven to be real. Could you imagine if the government or a well-known, well-respected university announced they have the body of a Bigfoot? What if the story was that a hunter shot Bigfoot in self-defense and had the wherewithal and the ability to call others to come help him load the body and take it to the university? And I'll use the university here because maybe he didn't trust the government not to cover it up. With in-depth study and analysis, including DNA and an autopsy by a medical examiner, they prove that this was not a human being or any known species of animal. If that story broke, would you be able to accept that after centuries of calling it just a legend, a relic hominid lives in the wilds of North America? Or what if we were able to advance technology to the point where we could actually measure the weight of an individual's consciousness? There was a fake news article making the rounds about a decade ago claiming scientists had done it, and many, myself included, wanted to believe it. But when checking sources, as you should always do with information online, I was disappointed to realize the originating website was a parody site. But say researchers finally discovered a way to measure the weight of the soul leaving the body, proving that consciousness survives bodily death. That would have to make a non-believer reconsider, right? Maybe, but some people would still doubt it because it can be difficult to accept facts that are in direct opposition to the way we think the world works. The news that the Debrief broke Monday morning has the potential to be on that level. If everything that was told to reporters Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal is true and accurate, the U.S. government may be in possession of materials from technology that didn't originate on Earth. Here are the first few paragraphs of the story. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can read the whole article for yourself. And please do, because there is a lot of information in it. A former intelligence official turned whistleblower has given Congress and the intelligence community inspector general extensive classified information about deeply covert programs that he says possess retrieved, intact, and partially intact craft of non-human origin. The information, he says, has been illegally withheld from Congress, and he filed a complaint alleging that he suffered illegal retaliation for his confidential disclosures, reported here for the first time. Other intelligence officials, both active and retired, with knowledge of these programs through their work in various agencies, have independently provided similar, corroborating information, both on and off the record. End quote. For UFO/UAP witnesses, we're one step closer to validation. For everyone else, we could be one step closer to disclosure. But for the cynical sort of die-hard skeptics, without incontrovertible evidence they can see or touch, it may not be enough to make them consider it. They need to see it to believe it, and even then, some will prefer to believe the story be disinformation to hide man-made technology from prying eyes. Why? Because history seems to show that the U.S. government has been guilty of intentional misdirection in past decades. So now with this week's news, everyone should start thinking about a potentially massive paradigm shift. I'd like to think we're at a point in time when most people can handle learning we are not alone in the universe. But that's because I'm an open-minded optimist with a lifetime of personal experiences that have me convinced there's way more to this world than we can see. I'm always reminded that there is so much that we don't know. And when we learn something new that proves to us how little we know, the hardest thing to do for some people is to admit with humility that maybe we don't know much at all. But what about you? If hypothetically the president came on primetime TV and announced we had retrieved alien craft, could you integrate that knowledge into your worldview? Or would that be too difficult to process? Does your personal belief system have that kind of fluidity and resilience? I think that's the question everyone should be asking themselves right now. Thank you for listening. If you're interested in sharing your paranormal stories with us, or if you have an idea for an episode topic, please reach out through the contact form at peeppodcast.com. That's P-E-E-P podcast.com. Remember, that stands for People Experiencing Everyday Paranormal. While you're there, sign up for my newsletter and keep up with the podcast and all my creative and energetic endeavors. I only email it once a month. You'll receive briefs on recent episodes, information on any upcoming appearances, news, and some additional fun stuff like drawings for autographed books or logoed goodies. If you enjoy the podcast, please give it some rating love on your favorite podcast app, share it with friends, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Ratings and reviews help the podcast be found by others. A huge thank you to everyone who's given the show love. I truly appreciate it. No matter how you support the show, listening, telling others about it, financial support through the donate button on the website, or any other way, I absolutely appreciate your being here. Thanks again for listening. Stay safe and be well.